So Leon, earlier you and I were talking about digitization in retail, and you have another thing that's happening. What is that?
Yes, one of the other major phenomena that we see occurring across the industry is the growth of what is called micro fulfillment centers or market fulfillment centers, otherwise known as MFCs. And what MFCs are smaller, more localized distribution networks that get set up by robotics, such that ultimately what used to be a sort of a small warehouse now gets automated. It is robotified, if you will, and robots are doing the picking and the packing of orders that are made online. Today, a lot of those orders are picked and packed at stores. You know, people running up and down the aisles with carts, competing with shoppers. That's a very short-term phenomenon. What we're starting to see is retailers investing significant capital expenditures today in building out these more localized but robotified, smaller fulfillment centers to enable the fulfillment of shoppers' e-commerce orders. And that is something that we are seeing take place across a wide swath, particularly of grocery and mass merchandise retailers in the United States and in other parts of the world. This idea of creating what I call robo-retail, so that you're ordering that online. It's not a person who's doing the picking anymore.
Right.
Increasingly, it's going to be a robot. And that's happening because the cost of fulfillment is such a significant driver of profitability that there really is a need to automate that in a fashion that takes cost out.
Well, you know, most consumers today, they like things on demand and fast. Does that make it easier to do quicker fulfillment?
It certainly does. I mean, many of these micro fulfillment centers, when built out, when offered at scale, are going to be able to handle orders of several dozen items and be able to put those together in really just a few minutes. And so the ability to drive rapidity of delivery is going to be accompanied by automation. There's no question. It's going to have implications. It's going to have challenges, I think, for the industry as a whole, which we can talk about, because everything that is produced today is intended to sell off a shelf and to be picked by a consumer off the shelf. Well, going forward, that isn't going to be the case for increasing amount of volume that moves through e-commerce.
So would an MFC make it easier when you have supply chain issues?
It will make it easier with, I'll call it front-end supply chain issues. Labor issues around warehouses, transportation, things like that. That will make it easier. Back-end supply chain issues, trucking, transportation, port kinds of issues, doesn't so much affect that yet. It really affects then at that local level the capacity to place an order and have it fulfilled and available to the shopper within that half hour or an hour window or so. To the extent that that can become automated, a lot of the labor issues that are plaguing the industry right now, they become much less of a factor.
Yeah. So when do you see full implementation of MFCs happening?
Full implementation is probably going to happen by the end of this decade. Okay. And that may sound like a long time, but you have to realize the amount of capital expenditures that are being poured into this right now, and the extent to which these are going to build themselves, they're going to build themselves out. So I would expect by about 2030, you're going to see, for a number of retailers, I would say the majority of their e-commerce being fulfilled by robots.
So you said the end of the decade, that's another 8 years away. What's preventing that from happening in the next 3, 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I think is the degree of change that that's going to cause for the supplier community, the manufacturer community around packaging. When you think about it, today all packages are sent to retailers in order to enable shelf distribution. Going forward, packaging is going to have to be altered in order to accommodate these micro-fulfillment centers. So case packs that are sent in are probably going to need to be larger. They're going to need to be automatically, the top of the case automatically removed for decanting and induction into totes that will enable those to be moved into the systems. Robots are going to need to pick the primary packages. A lot of primary packaging today is not intended to be picked by robots. It's intended to be picked by people. Think about bags and pouches and circular sorts of bottles. Another change, I think, is that primary packaging needs to be packable. A lot of times a lot of the containers are not intended to be packed into cases or into totes to be delivered to consumers in a way that's most efficient. So all of those packaging changes, secondary packaging and also primary packaging, those are going to have to be changed in a more robot-friendly world, we'll call it.